I never thought that love could destroy me. Not in the way it happened. You must be wondering what could be more devastating than losing someone you love. But the answer lies in the details, in the secrets that no one ever reveals. They hide, invisible, until you find yourself cornered by the truth itself. And the truth, as we know, is a prison without bars, without doors, without escape. Jaehyun was used to having everything under control. His life, his career, his friends, and love. Especially Hyejin's love. She was his reason, the light in his darkness. Her eyes. Oh, those eyes. She had a way of looking at him as if he were the only one in the world. She made the impossible seem simple, the grayest day, the most golden. But Jaehyun was losing more than just her. He was losing himself. On those quiet nights, amidst the sound of the waves and the cold winds, he knew something wasn't right. What he didn't know was that the world, his perfect world, was about to collapse right in front of him. It all started with something simple. A message. Curious, but nothing alarming. A name he knew well. Nian. Her friend. A friend he always considered just that. A friend. But the words, those little words, began to create an unbearable echo in his mind. Jaehyun, you will never understand. Not until it's too late. Those words hammered in his head, repeating and transforming into something more, something he didn't want to see, something he didn't want to admit. But the lie started to take shape in front of him, like a shadow that wouldn't let him sleep. He knew something was happening between them, and it wasn't just a friendship. But what could he do? Hyejin would never do anything to hurt him, right? She, with her tender smile, with her unwavering trust, how could she be capable of hiding something so dark? Something Jaehyun could never imagine, until the night everything started to unfold. It was late when he got home, the biting wind of the city freezing his skin. The apartment was empty, which wasn't unusual. Hyejin had the habit of going for long walks when things got heavy between them. But that night, there was something strange in the air, an invisible weight, something he couldn't touch, but could feel. He looked around, searching for something, a clue, anything that could help him understand what was happening. Then he saw it, the message on her phone, a photo of Nian and him, smiling together, in a place he never knew existed. The air condensed, the pressure rose, and the truth began to form. It was no longer a coincidence. Jaehyun swallowed hard, the weight of guilt and doubt crushing his chest. He knew that, at that moment, he had lost Hyejin, but that wasn't all. He had lost his dignity, his trust. He looked at the screen of his phone, his fingers trembling. A message he should never have read, that should never have been written. "I miss you," the message said. But who was it referring to? Who was this you? He no longer knew who to trust. Time seemed to have stopped, frozen, as he tried to process what he had just discovered. The pain, the anger, the fear, all mixed into one feeling, like a poison running through his veins. That night, he didn't sleep. He just sat there on the couch, the lights off, with his mind working frantically, trying to understand what had just happened. But at the same time, he knew that even if he could understand, he didn't want to. It was easier to get lost in the confusion. It was easier not to know, not to see, not to believe. But the truth doesn't take long to appear, and deep down, Jaehyun knew the lie was about to reveal itself in an even more cruel way. He couldn't have imagined that, by dawn, the pain he felt would only be the beginning of something even more devastating. She disappeared without a trace. Hyejin, the woman he loved, the woman he had sworn to spend the rest of his life with. The emptiness she left behind was more than just an absence. It was an abyss, a black space that seemed to swallow everything around it. Her phone didn't ring, and with every passing minute, the terror grew. Jaehyun searched for her, desperate, asking everyone, even Nian, but she didn't know where Hyejin was. The words of the friend were empty, filled with a fake sadness, as if she were trying to hide something Jaehyun still couldn't understand. But something was wrong. He could feel it. He knew. There was no time left for doubts. The days passed, and Hyejin's absence became a constant shadow, a cruel reminder of everything he had lost and what was still to come. The city, which once seemed alive, now seemed suffocated, buried under the weight of fear. Jaehyun began to hear echoes, voices, things that couldn't be explained. He looked at the places where she used to be, but she wasn't there. And then the message he never imagined receiving. From Nian, I knew that one day you would find out, and I knew that one day you would understand. But now, there is no turning back. These words were like poison, spreading through his body, corroding his soul. What did she mean? What else was being hidden? Jaehyun felt a knot tighten in his stomach. Something wasn't right. None of this was right. Hyejin's disappearance wasn't just an accident. It wasn't just a twist of fate. There was something more, and Jaehyun was about to discover that the truth wasn't just cruel, but terribly darker than he had ever imagined. But for now, he didn't know. He had no idea how much suffering awaited him. And, in his heart, he felt a growing guilt, an impossible weight to carry. What had he done? What had he known? And more importantly, what had he failed to do? With every second, with every breath, the abyss grew larger, deeper. And, before he could process what was happening, an even more terrible truth would begin to reveal itself. And all he could do was fight to survive. The pain, like a dull knife, cut Jaehyun from the inside. He couldn't breathe properly. He felt the weight of guilt crushing his chest with every passing second. He still remembered the sparkle in Hyejin's eyes, the softness of her voice. How could something so perfect disappear like this, without explanation? How could she simply leave, and leave him with the pain, with the guilt? He didn't know where to go, or what to do. Everything he knew had fallen apart. Hyejin wasn't there, but her absence was a constant presence, a ghost that haunted him. He looked at the empty streets, the silent city. Everything felt like a prison now, a maze with no way out. Then, that message from Nian, Hyejin's friend, echoed in his mind. I knew that one day you would find out, and I knew that one day you would understand. But now, there is no turning back. Jaehyun began to investigate. Every step he took, every clue he found, seemed to only deepen the mystery. He couldn't let this slide. He couldn't. But what was he looking for? The truth? Or a way to erase the pain that was eating him alive? He found himself in places he never imagined he'd go. He found documents, old photos, memories that belonged to a parallel reality, a reality he had never imagined. Hyejin and Nian had more in common than he thought, more than he'd ever imagined. Each discovery left him more lost, more desperate. He began to feel like he was being followed. Stares, footsteps, whispers in the distance. He was no longer alone. It was as if someone was watching, waiting. Every corner of his house now seemed filled with shadows, figures moving in the gaps of light. One night, when the shadows took over the apartment, Jaehyun received a call. The number was unknown, but something inside him made him answer. Jaehyun. The voice on the other end of the line whispered, almost inaudible. Do you want to know what happened to Hyejin? Jaehyun's heart raced. How did someone know about her disappearance? How did someone know about his pain? I know what you did. The voice continued, its tone dark and threatening. You think it was because of Nian? You're very wrong. The truth is much more cruel. The line was abruptly cut off. The silence after the call was deafening. He was trembling, unsure if it was real or a mental torture, but a chilling sensation ran down his spine. There was something there, something he didn't fully understand. That night, Jaehyun couldn't differentiate his thoughts from reality anymore. He remembered the night he found Hyejin's message on the phone, the photo with Nian. He remembered every word exchanged between them. The betrayal was a weight he carried, but until then, he hadn't known how deep the abyss was that he had created. The guilt consumed him, but the fear of losing everything, of discovering the truth, was even greater. He felt the need to find Nian, confront her. Only she could give him answers, but she too was missing, like Hyejin. Where were they? What were they hiding? He tried calling her, but Nian's phone was also off. The streets seemed emptier than ever. The wind blew with an intensity that made the trees sway, creating a sense of unease. Jaehyun walked the streets aimlessly. With every step, the doubt intensified. He didn't know what was more terrifying, the disappearance of both women or the fact that he had been left behind, as if he were part of a game he didn't understand. He felt manipulated, a piece on a board whose rules he couldn't comprehend. The fear turned into desperation. Jaehyun was close to losing his mind. The walls of his mind began to crumble, one by one. What had he done wrong? Where had he failed? It was then, in a dark alley, that he saw a figure. It was Neon, Hyejin's friend, but she didn't look like before. Her eyes were empty, as if she were dead inside. She looked at him with a cold, distant gaze. "I knew you'd come, Jaehyun," she said, with a voice that didn't sound human, as if something much worse was taking over her. "I knew that, sooner or later, you'd want to know the truth. But you're not ready for it." Jaehyun's blood ran cold. He took a step back.
What did she mean by that?
Not ready for the truth? The truth about what? You don't understand. Neon continued, her expression tortured, as if she were trying to break free from something that consumed her. The truth will destroy you. The truth is the reason why Hyejin disappeared. The reason why she had to leave your life. She couldn't live with it anymore, Jaehyun. And you're the last person who will understand. Neon's words echoed in Jaehyun's mind. He wanted to scream, he wanted to understand, but the words wouldn't come. What else had happened between them? Between him and them? What was he losing without even knowing? Neon vanished into the shadows, as mysterious as ever. Jaehyun was back to square one, with more questions than answers. But one thing he knew now, he was no longer just searching for Hyejin. He was searching for himself. And with every step he took, he knew his journey would take him to a place with no return. Because whatever he had done, or failed to do, the truth was finally within his reach. And when it was revealed, nothing would ever be the same again. Nothing. The city never seemed so cold. Every corner, every street, was immersed in a dense fog that seemed to swallow any trace of warmth. Jaehyun walked the deserted sidewalks, his body heavy, as if he carried the weight of an entire world on his shoulders. He could barely breathe, Neon's words echoing in his mind. The truth will destroy you, Jaehyun. You're not ready for it. He didn't know what he wanted more. The truth or silence. The truth had become a monster in his mind, with sharp claws, waiting for the right moment to tear his soul apart. He wasn't sure of anything anymore. He didn't know what was real, what was a lie. With every step he took, the pain grew. The guilt tore him apart from the inside out, but the fear of what he would find by discovering more paralyzed him. He needed to find her. He needed answers. But what was he really searching for? Hyejin? Neon? Or himself? Night fell, and Jaehyun arrived at Hyejin's apartment. The building seemed darker than ever. He hesitated for a moment, his heart beating harder with every second. He didn't know what he was looking for there, but something inside him pushed him forward. He couldn't turn back now. The door was slightly open, as if the house had been waiting for him. The air was dense, charged with an unsettling stillness. He entered. The furniture was in the same place, but something was strange. Something was out of place. The silence was deafening. Every step he took echoed through the walls, as if the apartment itself were watching. He found Hyejin's phone on the table. He knew he shouldn't touch it, but he couldn't resist. The temptation was stronger than any reason. The phone was unlocked, as if it was waiting for him to discover something. The messages were there, clearly visible. Everything he needed to know was there, waiting to be read. But the last message was the most impactful. "I can't live like this anymore. I can't keep hiding. I'm sorry, Jaehyun, but you have to know before it's too late." The world seemed to collapse beneath his feet. What did that mean? What did Hyejin want to say? Sorry?
Why?
What was happening? He looked around, his eyes searching for answers in every corner of the house. But nothing made sense. What was hidden? He felt like the place was alive, breathing with him, feeling his pain, sharing his despair. Then he saw it. At the back of the drawer, Hidden among papers and old letters, a small envelope. Jaehyun opened it with trembling hands, his heart racing uncontrollably. Inside, there was a photo. A photo of Hyejin and Neon, together but not as friends.
No.
They were closer than he could have ever imagined. The image captured an intimate moment, a shared smile, a gaze filled with something much deeper than friendship. Jaehyun felt the nausea rise in his throat. What was he seeing? It was another world, a world he didn't know, a world he wasn't part of. The hole in his stomach widened, and he swallowed hard, feeling an unbearable weight in his chest. But there was more. He turned the photo over, and there was a handwritten message, in small letters, almost illegible. "You'll never understand what happens between us, Jaehyun. You'll never understand the pain we carry. Now it's too late." What did that mean? What did Hyejin want to say with this? Why did she have to distance herself from him? Why couldn't she just tell him the truth? But he already knew the answer. He already felt, deep down, that the truth was something he couldn't bear. Jaehyun felt his shoulders drop, the sensation of despair crushing him more than ever. He no longer knew what was real. He no longer knew what he truly felt. What was happening to him? What was happening with Hyejin and Neon? He knew he needed to go deeper. He needed to understand once and for all what was happening. But he also knew this could mean his destruction. Maybe he was weaker than he thought. Maybe the truth was something he couldn't face. As he stood up to leave the apartment, he felt a presence behind him. A sigh, almost inaudible, cutting through the silence of the night. He turned quickly, his body on alert, but there was no one there. Just the emptiness, the empty space where something was present, but could not be seen. He froze, fear taking over his senses. He was no longer alone. There was something else, something watching him, waiting. With the photo in his hands, Jaehyun hurried out of the apartment. He needed to find Neon. He needed to confront her. Only she knew the truth.
She had to know.
But when he arrived at Neon's house, the scene seemed worse than ever. The house was locked. The lights were off. Jaehyun knocked on the door, but there was no answer. Nothing. He looked around, the feeling of being watched growing even stronger. And then he saw it. A shadow moving in the window. Silent but so close. Jaehyun took a step toward the door, his fingers trembling. He wanted to call out, ask, but something stopped him. Something made him stop. He knew he wasn't ready for what he would find. Inside the house, there was something he couldn't understand. Something darker, more terrifying than he imagined. The truth wasn't just a simple revelation.
No.
It was a nightmare, a point of no return. He stepped back from the door, his heart racing, his body in panic. He knew he wasn't alone. He knew that Hyejin and Neon were there, somehow, hiding something that could destroy him completely. But he couldn't stop. He couldn't give up. He still didn't know what he would find, but he knew that with every step he took, he was closer to a truth that would consume him. Because, deep down, Jaehyun knew it wouldn't just be the pain that would destroy him. It would be the guilt. The guilt for never having seen what was right in front of his eyes. The biting wind blowing through the empty streets seemed to cut into Jaehyun's soul. With every step he took, the weight of guilt pulled him down, as if the ground itself was trying to swallow him. He knew he was heading to the wrong place, but he couldn't stop anymore. The need to uncover the truth about Hyejin and Neon was stronger than any fear. He was no longer alone, neither in the world nor in his mind. The shadows followed him, watching his every move. They were there, waiting, always present, like an invisible force trailing behind him at every corner, every street. He could no longer distinguish what was real from what wasn't. Neon's house was now before him, cold and inhospitable. The silence surrounding it was oppressive, as if it had been swallowed by a greater force. The windows were shut, and there were no signs of life. But Jaehyun knew she was inside. He could feel it, like an intuition, a perception that made him tremble. He couldn't wait any longer. He knocked on the door forcefully, his body tense, his breath short. Nothing. Silence was the only answer he got. But something was wrong. He could feel it. The smell in the house was heavy, filled with a strange stench, something pungent, as if the air had been left stagnant for days. He touched the doorknob, and, to his surprise, the door was slightly ajar. Cautiously, he entered. The smell grew stronger as he stepped into the dark space. There were no furniture, only stacked boxes and papers scattered across the floor. The disorder was immense, but it wasn't what caught his attention the most. It was the dense, heavy atmosphere, as if time had stopped there, frozen, waiting for something that was about to happen. He began searching. Every room, every corner of the house seemed to have something hidden.
Something he needed to see.
Something he didn't want to see. He knew he couldn't turn back now, that whatever was there would change everything. He rummaged through the drawers, the table, until he finally found a crumpled piece of paper under a chair. With trembling hands, he untied it and read,
Jaihin, you don't understand. Not now.
Maybe you'll never understand. We couldn't hide anymore. We can't live with this weight any longer. What we did wasn't just for us. It was for you too. There's no turning back.
I'm sorry.
I'm no longer in control of the situation. She will make everything end. The handwriting was unmistakable. It was Hyojin's. Jaihin felt the pain tighten his heart. The words were clear, but what did they mean? What did Hyojin mean by she? Who was controlling everything? And what did he have to do with it? With the paper still in his hands, he ran to Nian's room. He needed to understand. He needed to know what was happening. When he entered, the sight paralyzed him. The room was immersed in a dense darkness, the only light coming from the broken window, illuminating the shards of glass scattered on the floor. But it was the bed that caught his attention. It was covered with a sheet stained with something that looked like blood. The sight made him stagger. He swallowed hard, his heart racing. No, this couldn't be real. This wasn't happening. But there it was, the scene before his eyes, more macabre than he could have imagined. The smell of fresh blood filled his nostrils. The mix of terror and disgust made him lose control for a moment. He knelt by the bed, his mind spinning. What was he seeing? What was he missing? Nian, Hyojin, what had they done? What did he have to do with all of this? It was then that he heard it, a low whisper coming from somewhere. He looked around, but there was no one. The silence returned, but he couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched. A chill ran down his spine. Something was coming closer. Something he didn't want to face. The sound of light footsteps echoed down the hallway. Jaihin quickly got up, trying to identify where they were coming from. He looked at the hallway, but nothing. Just the echo of his own thoughts. And then he saw her.
Nian.
She was standing in the doorway of the room, her eyes empty, as if she were drifting somewhere far away. Her face was pale, almost lifeless, and her lips were stained with something dark. She seemed more like a shadow than a person. You shouldn't be here, Jaihin, she said, her voice weak and trembling, as if she were fighting against something greater than herself. Jaihin took a step back, his body instinctively pulling away. He didn't know what to do. Nian seemed out of control, as if she were being consumed by something she couldn't stop. He felt adrenaline coursing through his veins, the need to run, but something stopped him from leaving. Something was pulling him deeper. We couldn't hide anymore. I couldn't keep going, Nian continued, her voice now stronger, more desperate. Hyojin, she wanted you to know the truth. But the truth, it's not what you imagine. You were part of it. You always were. Nian's words echoed like a sentence. Jaihin felt the ground crumble beneath his feet. He didn't understand. He couldn't understand.
What did she mean by that?
What did Hyojin want him to know? Nian approached, her eyes locked on his. Her gaze was so empty, so distant, as if she were trapped in something much bigger than herself. Now, it's too late, Jaihin. There's no going back. Before he could react, she turned her back and disappeared into the darkness of the hallway, leaving Jaihin alone again, with the feeling that everything he thought was alive had faded. And there, in the silence of the house, he understood. The truth was there before him, but he still wasn't ready to face it. And perhaps he would never be. All he knew was that he would never be the same. Nothing would ever be. The clock seemed to have stopped. Every second was an eternity. Jaehyun stood there, in the center of the empty house, the emptiness of Neon and Hyojin consuming him. What he had just heard made no sense. Neon's words hammered in his mind like a deafening echo, a distorted melody he couldn't get out of his head. You were always part of this. You were the beginning, Jaehyun. He walked through the house in silence, each step dragging, as if the weight of his own body was becoming unbearable. The walls, once familiar, now seemed threatening. The shadows stretched, distorted, as if they had a life of their own. He no longer knew who to trust. He no longer knew what was happening. He thought of Hyojin, the happy moments they spent together, the love he believed to be unshakable. But now, all that remained was a black hole, an immense void. He looked at Hyojin's phone, still in his hands. The message she had left. The weight of guilt was even more crushing. I'm sorry, Jaehyun, but you have to know before it's too late. But what was this too late? What was happening? Suddenly, the phone rang, breaking the oppressive silence of the house. Jaehyun jumped to grab it, his heart racing. When he answered, the voice on the other end was soft, almost sweet, but filled with something dark. Jaehyun, you finally understood, didn't you? Neon's voice whispered, carrying a tone that wasn't human. You realized what happened, you realized who we are and what we did, but you still don't understand. You don't understand the truth. Jaehyun swallowed hard, his hands sweating. Where is Hyojin? What happened to her? Neon laughed, but it was an empty laugh, full of bitterness. You really want to know, Jaehyun? You want to know why she disappeared? Why everything was planned this way? It's not about you, Jaehyun. It never was. It was about her. It was about what Hyojin could no longer hide. The word, hide, cut through the air. Jaehyun didn't know what to do anymore, where to go. He felt trapped, immersed in a maze where the answers only pushed him toward more questions. You're talking about me, Jaehyun whispered, as if trying to convince himself he was wrong, that there was still a way out. Yes, Neon replied, almost melancholic. But you don't see it, Jaehyun. You never saw it. Hyojin and I made a pact from the beginning. It wasn't about betrayal. It was about guilt. Your guilt. You were the key. What you did or what you didn't do changed everything. And you were never able to realize it. Jaehyun felt as if the world were collapsing on top of him. He could no longer breathe. What was she saying? How could he be the key to everything? How had he not realized? You never noticed, Jaehyun. You never saw that your love for Hyojin wasn't what it seemed. You two were connected in a way you don't understand. The reason for everything. The reason Hyojin disappeared. The reason she's gone. Why everything is falling apart. The conversation felt like a nightmare, Neon's words turning into sharp blades that cut him, fragmenting his sanity. He needed to leave. He needed to escape. But there was nowhere to go. He no longer knew where good and evil began and ended. He no longer knew who he was. She will come back, Jaehyun. Don't worry, Neon continued, her voice cold. But nothing will be the same. She won't be the same. And you won't be either. The call was abruptly cut off, leaving Jaehyun alone again. He sat on the floor, his eyes fixed on the shadows that seemed to move around him. He could no longer distinguish what was real and what wasn't. Neon's words, their presence, everything blended into a confusion of pain and regret. He would never be the same. That night, he decided to return to the only place he knew he could find some answers. The old cafe, where he and Hyojin used to meet. That place was the last true memory he had of her. There, perhaps, he would find something to bring him peace. Or maybe something that would consume him completely. The cafe was empty, as always. The dim lights illuminated the deserted tables, and the smell of bitter coffee seemed to linger in the air. He sat at the same table where he had sat so many times with Hyojin. He looked at the empty spot across from him, wondering if she would ever return. But as he waited, silence took over. There were no answers for him there. Suddenly, he felt a touch on his shoulder. Jaehyun turned quickly, and there she was. Hyojin. But she was not the same Hyojin. Her eyes were empty, as if she had been marked by something far beyond human. "You don't understand, Jaehin," she said, her voice emotionless. "You never understood. You didn't know that the love you felt for me was just an illusion. I was your prison, and now you're trapped too." Jaehin tried to speak, but the words failed him. She was no longer the woman he loved. She was different. Something in her was broken, irreparable. "There's no turning back, Jaehin," Hyojin whispered, her gaze fixed on his face. "You were part of this. And now, the truth will come to light. No matter what you do, what we were, what we did, there's no going back." And with that, she disappeared, like a shadow dissolving into the night. Jaehin stood there alone, with the feeling that his life had been a lie. The cafe, the love, everything he believed in, now turned into a bitter memory. He looked one last time at the spot where Hyojin had been and realized he could never go back to the past. He was now just a part of the story, a piece that could no longer be changed. The truth destroyed him, and from that moment on, he knew neither love nor guilt could save him. The emptiness was the only companion he had left. And there, in the midst of eternal silence, Jaehin finally understood. Maybe the real prison had never been Hyojin. Maybe it had been himself, trapped in the illusion of a love that never existed. Jaehin lived his worst nightmare. The truth, the guilt, and the pain intertwined irreversibly, and everything he believed, everything he loved, crumbled before his eyes. But what about you, viewer? What would you do if you were in his place? How far would your guilt and obsession with the truth take you? Did Jaehin really understand what happened? Or did he remain lost forever, trapped in the prison of his own mind, unable to escape the pain of the past? Leave your answers in the comments and tell us what you think really happened to him, to Hyojin, to Neon. If you enjoyed this dark and mysterious story, don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more intense narratives like this. Hit the bell so you won't miss the next videos, and until the next tale, the mystery never ends.